Welcome to the CondoVulturesTV podcast with your host, Peter Zalewski, a Miami real estate broker, Wall Street consultant, and expert witness. This podcast is focused on identifying real estate buying opportunities in the South Florida condo market of Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties. The CondoVulturesTV podcast is not authorized by the South Florida real estate industry and will most likely annoy many of the region's talking heads. This podcast will feature straight talk and salty language that could be offensive to some. Please remember that past investment success does not determine future gains, especially in South Florida's volatile condo market. For more information, please visit CondoVultures.com. Don't buy a South Florida condo, discounted or distressed, before taking a Condo Vultures correction tour. CondoVultures.com offers weekly bus and walking tours that focus on educating buyers on the how-tos of identifying discounted condos, analyzing the opportunities, and purchasing units. Every tour attendee receives a list of all condo projects in a particular market, a market assessment handout, and unmatched expert analysis. For more information on the condo correction tours, please visit CondoVultures.eventbrite.com.
This is Peter Zalewski of the Condo Vultures podcast. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. And I wanted to alert you that if you have a property that you're looking to sell in the Tri-County, South Florida area, I would encourage you to reach out to Jenny Cortez, a licensed real estate broker with CVRRealty.com. She's my partner. She's been in the business for north of 15 years. More importantly, she knows the market. She knows how to get a deal done. And she also realizes that it's more important to get a price that you can accept and sell the property rather than to hold firm on some price that's never going to be achieved and ultimately languish on the market. So if you're looking to do a deal that you want a skilled expert who can help you sell a property, reach out to Jenny Cortez at 305-865-5859, 305-865-5859, or visit her website, CVRRealty.com.
Welcome to the Miami Reporters Roundtable. I'm your host, Peter Zalewski from Condo Vultures. If you're tuning in this podcast, you're going to hear a conversation by current and former journalists talking about some of the biggest stories that have occurred within the last week or so, all affecting or impacting South Florida economy as well as real estate market. What we do is I handpick 6 articles. I send them off to our journalists, ask them to go ahead and give them a read. And basically they're going to give us their perspective on what's really going on. A lot of fluff, a lot of hyperbole in the marketplace in South Florida. So we want to give you, the audience, an idea of what's probably really going on. Who is the target market for this podcast? It's going to be a developer. It'll be a real estate professional. It'll be a buyer. It'll be a seller. We're also out there for gadflies. So if you're somebody who likes to go to cocktail parties, you want to be ahead of the curve, throwing out opinions and catching people's attention, this might be just a podcast for you. So let me go ahead. I'm going to introduce our guests or our podcast members for this particular week. We have a gentleman who was a journalist for over 25 years, primarily in the state of Florida. Now he lives in Miami. He has a public relations marketing firm called Gruss Communications. His website is GrussPR.com. That's GRUSSPR.com. No one else but John Gruss. You want to get him on Twitter? You can get him at John Gruss, JeanGruss. What's going on, Mr. Gruss? How are you?
Hey, Peter. It's great to be back on your unauthorized and sometimes unpublishable podcast.
And sometimes unpublishable podcast. We ran into a little bit of a technical problem trying to get it published. It was sort of a chain of events after one of our podcast members threw me for a loop with a lot of technical errors. And now, lo and behold, I finally get the podcast all edited, ready to go, and then we'll publish. So hopefully with any luck, I'll be able to get it up this evening. So we should be in good shape. And hopefully that was just a little road bump in the overall process, but fingers crossed. Who else do we have on the podcast this week? We have a gentleman who was a journalist for over 20 years, wrote about white collar crime. He did business stories, and he also did restaurant reviews. Right now he does marketing and consulting. No one else but John Fakler. You want to get hold of John, get him on Twitter, which I guess now it's called X, formerly Twitter. You can get him at JT Fakler, Fakler. What's going on, Mr. Fakler?
Hey, Peter, how's it going? Glad to be back on your Modern Marvel podcast. It's a wonder.
It's great to have you. Mr. Fakler, you are a New York Jets fan. The NFL football season is going to be beginning soon. Your organization has made a number of moves to try to put themselves in a position where they're actually going to be decent, possibly good. But you are living in Miami Dolphins territory. So I'm just wondering, as we go into the NFL season, What is your outlook for the Jets? And more important, what's your outlook for the Miami Dolphins? We want to get you on the record so we can hold you to it as the podcast progresses through the season.
Well, it's a tough division. I think there a lot of hyperbole out there about them going to the Super Bowl. I'll be happy if they just make the playoffs. It's a tough division. I think the Dolphins have a good chance of making the playoffs too. So we'll just have to wait and see.
So, Mr. Fakler, this is an unauthorized podcast, and the goal of it is to cut through the fluff and try to give straight talk. So why don't you give us some straight talk? What kind of record do you anticipate for the New York Jets? What kind of record do you anticipate for the Miami Dolphins?
Jets 11-6, and the Dolphins 10-7.
Wow, interesting. So, okay, we're going to hold you to that. We'll make sure to make a note of that, and every week we will update our audience as to how both teams are faring.
Don't forget, we've got an over-under too. We got a little side bet going.
We do have a side bet. Every year I bet Mr. Fakler. I pick a number and I ask Mr. Fakler if the New York Jets are going to win over or under a specific number of wins. Yes. It is 9 wins. He has taken the over. So if the New York Jets win 10 games or more, he wins money. But more likely than not, I'm going to win again for I don't know how many consecutive years. So that being said, let me introduce you to the fourth member of our podcast this week. He's making his premiere. This is the first time, his debut. First time he's going to be on our podcast. This is a journalist that I worked with 20 years ago or so. He was a journalist for nearly 2 decades. He had a stint where he was living in the Arabian Peninsula, working for a large oil company. He worked at a variety of different publications, including a fintech company. Right now he's doing some freelance work. It's no one else but Forrest Jones. You want to get a hold of Forrest, you can get him on Twitter. And Forrest, let me make sure I get this right. I'm going to look at my notes because it's the first time you've been on. Your Twitter handle, which I guess it's X now, formerly Twitter, is A like Apple, F like Frank, J like Jones, number 3. Is that right? AFJ number 3. Is that how people can get a hold of you, Forrest?
That's correct. Thanks, Peter. I'm really psyched to be here. Really, thank you so much.
It's going to be fun. Forrest, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience? I mean, you had a stint. You worked at Latin Trade, if anybody remembers that publication, when Miami was like this hub for international trade, free trade. It was shortly after NAFTA. People were ripping down the barriers for trade. You were a foreign correspondent. You were down in South America. You then did a stint where you got a master's degree at a university in Arizona. Can you give people just like an overview about sort of what you've seen since you were basically raised in Miami?
Yeah, absolutely. I was a journalist in Venezuela and Chile in the 90s. I was a political and economics reporter. It was Bridge News. Don't know if anyone remembers it. It was the offshoot of the marriage of Knight Ridder Financial and Dow Jones Telerate. So I covered the Chavez debate, even interviewed Chavez at his house when he was a candidate.
Wow.
Then that company went under. We got bought out by Reuters. So I came work for you with you at World City. Then on my way to Latin Trade, when free trade was, a panacea, a miracle, for everything. That didn't work out. The magazine went under. So I went to did a brief stint at Microsoft, got my MBA at Thunderbird, then did Latin Trade, freelance for a while, then made my way to Aramco, where I spent 5 years in the Environmental Protection Department, work as a writer-editor. And most recently, I was with Mambu, fintech. And, we have some layoffs there, like everyone in the tech industry. So freelancing right now in Miami and, enjoying myself. Glad to be here.
We're glad to have you back, Forrest. Glad to have you back. And if anybody's looking for freelancers, reach out to Forrest. Again, you can reach him on X, which is formerly Twitter, AFJ number 3. Fantastic. So guys, now that we've done the introduction, let me just sort of lay out the rules of engagement for our audience. Again, I handpicked 6 stories, send them off to the journalists, ask them to read them, to review them, and we're going to kick them around. We're going to discuss them. We're looking for straight talk, no fluff, no hyperbole. And I'm looking at you, Mr. Fakler. Don't be, giving us like the sweet side. We want to really get into the heart of the matter. The other thing I want to point out to the audience is if you like what you're hearing and if you like this program, you like this podcast, well, we're looking at the journalists that we bring on this podcast as superheroes, the same way that Marvel does with all of its characters. You can go out and you can buy mugs, you can buy t-shirts, all kinds of stuff. We're doing the same thing. We are now selling merch. So every one of the journalists that comes on the podcast, we view them as a superhero. And if you want to support what we're doing, we'd encourage you to go ahead and buy some of the stuff we have. We're not making a big profit on it. We're basically just trying to put it out there, trying to provide that, that connection to the community. If you want to buy anything, you can go to CondoVultures.creator-spring.com. I know it's kind of convoluted. We'll have a new title for it in the upcoming weeks, but right now, CondoVultures.creator, CREATOR hyphen, that line in the middle, then spring, like I can't wait for spring.com. So what we do is we do a screenshot from our podcast. We then take that screenshot, we put it on these different items, and then there's a company that goes ahead and makes it, small little spread on it, and then people were able to buy it. So Forrest, if you agree, we're gonna get your likeness on all of these same items. One of the popular items I hear is a shower curtain with Mr. Fakler on it. So first thing in the morning when someone walks in, they see this huge image of Mr. Fakler. So you too can be a superhero, just like Mr. Fakler and John and myself.
Yeah, I agree. Let's do superhero status, total halls of justice. Let's go for it.
Fantastic. And we're not doing advertising. We're not breaking up the podcast with advertisements. So let me give you the real quick spiel on who's the advertiser is. It's myself. I have a company called Condo Vultures. You can go and check out our website, CondoVulturesRealty.com, CondoVulturesRealty.com. To buy-side brokerage, also does consulting and expert witness. Anybody out there in the market looking for sort of critical eye as to what's really going on in the marketplace, reach out or go to the website. Maybe someone with my firm can help you. So all that being said, let's go ahead. We're going to get into the first story, first of 6. I'm going to read the headline. I'll read the first couple graphs, and then I'm going to ask one of our journalists to go ahead and give us their perspective. Mr. Fakler, we're going to go to you first with this particular story. You are a NFL football fan, New York Jets fan. We always give you grief about it, that they're always piss poor, and that's a technical term. But this year they might actually be doing well. But you also have evolved as a resident football or soccer expert. You're a member of the supporters club called Vice City. You go out to the matches. You don't necessarily always wear the proper garb. You've had some issues where they remove you from the section. So because you've been out there, because you've seen Messi, we want to get your perspective on this particular story. This is coming out of CBS Sports. CBS Sports, let me read you the headline. Lionel Messi's Inter Miami begin construction on Miami Freedom Park, 25,000 seat stadium to open in 2025. Subhead, the 131-acre development will house the stadium for MLS's hottest team. I'll read the first couple graphs from Mr. Fakler, then I want you to comment. First couple graphs are, Inter Miami have confirmed that construction has started on Miami Freedom Park, which is due to open in 2025 and host Lionel Messi's Major League Soccer side, Inter Miami. An official breaking ceremony will take place before the end of the year, but building work started earlier this month on a 130-acre development, which will house the stadium. We have a quote from the owner, Jorge Mas. It says, within Miami, my family set out to build something truly transformational. In just 4 years, we've changed the perception worldwide of American soccer. As we commence construction of Miami Freedom Park, that same vision guides us. Now, Mr. Fakler, 2025 is when the stadium is set to open. It's going to house roughly 25,000 people or so. The current stadium up in Fort Lauderdale, which will be their training facility, it used to house only about 18,000 once Lionel Messi signed over the summer. They brought in some temporary bleachers. The joke is they took them from the Formula One race that occurred a month before. They stuck him in the corners to try to maximize the Lionel Messi vibe, the energy. 25,000. Do you think that everything Inter Miami is doing is they're going to be able to fill this place? And second of all, what do you think about a 2025 deadline, given the fact that a lot of construction projects in Miami, they don't necessarily play out the way the developers like to discuss them at the onset?
Well, if Jorge Mas, the owner of the club, has anything to do with it, he'll be up everybody's ass to get this thing done. It sounds like a spectacular venue, definitely a destination. It's going to have a 50-acre park. It's going to have the stadium. Both of those will be built first. Then there'll be retail and shopping and restaurants. A big site, 130 acres. It's huge. My concern is that it's not big enough. It was mentioned in the story that the Nashville team, which is the best team, I think, in the league, sells that at 30,000 capacity. Well, what's going to happen with Miami is 25 now that it's in the Messi area. Now we have Messi mania. I'm more concerned that it's not going to be big enough, and hopefully they'll adjust, the seating capacity to maybe make it a little bit bigger. But I think if there's any construction issues, it might have something to do with that.
Now, Mr. Fakler, let me ask you: the Miami Marlins, the baseball team, they have a dome. It's air conditioned. A lot of times it's really cold in there, but they have this dome. It's one of the smallest stadiums in all of Major League Baseball. Anyone who's gone to any messy matches this year has had to deal with rain. Basically, it's been torrential rain, pissing down during the course of the summer, and you got to be an avid follower to stick around. The Marlins, they dealt with that initially. Now they have this dome, and nobody goes. Could we see a repeat of the Miami Marlins playing out with Inter Miami once the messy years are over, Mr. Fakler?
That's actually a brilliant idea. I'm wondering if the discussions are already underway for that, because I could tell you I was at a match at the Fort Lauderdale Stadium where it pissed down. I got so soaked, I almost got pneumonia. And if there's some way they can construct some sort of protection for the fans as part of this, where they can at least be out of the rain when it comes down, maybe they won't be able to cover the whole field. But I think it's a good idea. It's an idea to look at.
Well, Mr. Fakler, if I could interrupt, much like Hard Rock Stadium where the Miami Dolphins plays,
right?
Looks like the renderings are going to cover everybody seated, but the field will actually be exposed, like you would see at Hard Rock.
Yeah, well, that'll be, again, that's better than nothing. What happened at the game when we had this rain out? It was literally rained out for an hour. The field was soaked. We couldn't, everybody waited. A lot of people left. But we, eventually got back to our seats, but the field was a mop. It was just a mess. And I'm just concerned because, this is soccer. They're going to have to be able to have a good field to play. So I don't know if, just having the fans protected is enough. I think they may have to have the field protected, but that's just my opinion.
Now, we're going to show with the next story, but Forrest, I want to ask you a quick question. As somebody who was raised in Miami, what is the traffic like in and around Miami International Airport? Because that's where this stadium is going up. Now, granted, there is a Metro Rail and there is a Tri-Rail connection very close. And then B, Forrest, how do you feel about losing a golf course and park area and having it replaced by a stadium as somebody who basically was raised in Miami?
Well, I wouldn't worry so much about losing the golf course. Traffic's an issue, but it's going to be an issue. It already is an issue there. It's going to get worse. No, I mean, I think, it's it'll be a pain, but it'll be worth it. I guess the real issue is with this, how long is Messi going to be here? It's amazing to watch him play, but when he leaves, retires, with this momentum build and keep soccer going, maybe if that doesn't happen, then the traffic won't be an issue. So,
right? Exactly.
Well, his contract ends in 2025.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it's great. I mean, I've watched him play in the World Cup in an area of the world I used to live, and the Argentines lost to Saudi. So, I mean, it's amazing watching him play. But, from a league perspective, will the momentum say? I hope it does. But in terms of traffic, though, I mean, it's already a nightmare down there anyway. It's like going to a Canes game on a Thursday night or a Friday night.
My Miami Hurricanes college football.
Yeah, sorry about that. Miami Hurricanes. Yeah, I think people are just right off the afternoon to get to the game. Right now, Messi Mania is going. Full. People will overlook that for now.
John, what do you make of being able to take the Metro Rail or the Tri-Rail and basically have it drop you off, and then basically you're going to cross over a little bridge where there's a canal, and then it would dump you into this messy park, if you will, with the stadium, with the retail, with the office, with the hotel, all that type of stuff. Are people actually going to take the train? Are they lunatic like me and give up their car and be able to take the train to go see Messi or whoever follows?
I'm a real skeptic about this whole thing. I'm a skeptic about stadiums in general, because it's really hard to find very successful ones, and they're always oversold and overhyped. And the fact of the matter is Messi's contract ends in 2025. Did they just hire him to get this thing sailing through, to get this thing built? And once it's built, Messi's out of here. So what's the point? I mean, maybe go back to being a mediocre team, and I'll have trouble filling seats, but by then they will have had their stadium. So I don't know. I'm a bit of a skeptic when it comes to these, and there's just so much competition for sports in this town. I mean, it's you're competing with the Miami Dolphins, the Miami Marlins, the hockey. I mean, is there really that much disposable income for sports like this? I mean, I don't know. I think actually 25,000 is a very reasonable number. I wouldn't build it much bigger than that.
Great insight, guys. Let's go on to story number 2. Sean, we're going to stick with you with story number 2. This is coming out of the South Florida Agent Magazine. I'll read you the headline, first couple graphs, and I'll ask you to comment. Headline: Case-Shiller, which is the name of a research or ratings company, or an index, I should say. Case-Shiller, home price index just 0.02% off 2022 peak. Miami sees 2.5% gain. And first couple of graphs, Sean, and then I'll ask you to comment. Home prices rose for the fifth month in a row in June to essentially match an all-time peak reached a year ago, S&P Dow Jones indices said. Specifically, the S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller U.S. National Home Price Index rose by 0.9% month over month and was just 0.02% below its year-ago level, which marked the historic high for the measurement. June is the 5th consecutive month in which home prices have increased across the U.S., said S&P DJI Managing Director Craig Lazaro. With 2023 half over, the national composite has risen 4.7%, which is slightly above the median full calendar year increase in more than 35 years of data. In Miami, home prices posted a 2.5% year-over-year gain in June, while home prices rose 1.4% month over month. John, now granted, we are in September when we're recording this. This data is coming from June. It's a little bit staggered, if you will. What do you make of this? The fact that overall it looks like it's somewhat flat, but Miami had this 2.5% increase, which I will point out is less than inflation.
Yeah, I mean, this market is completely distorted by what the Federal Reserve has done in the last few years. I mean, it's at this point in the cycle, we should not be seeing this at this point of the interest rate cycle. Because I mean, with rising interest rates, this shouldn't be happening. But it just shows that the market's completely screwed up in terms of a limited inventory. There really are no homes sort of in the lower price ranges. That those homes, I mean, those listings have been completely obliterated. And so now you're seeing mostly, higher end homes, and so it's completely distorting the data. And now you have, with interest rates, so low, 2 to 3%, everybody's locked in those mortgages. Nobody's moving. It's a frozen market, and you have hardly any inventory. And when you do have transactions, it's so few transactions that it distorts the data. So, I mean, these numbers, this data, these indices are really reflecting how the whole market is just in this weird, unrealistic and distorted state. And I think it's going to be a while before it clears out because inventory's got to come back on. We have to have sales. I mean, the number of sales has declined by in the low double-digit percentages for the last 6 or 7 months in the Miami area. So I mean, with that, how do you rely on this data to make investment decisions or buying decisions? It's really very difficult, and it's misleading and it's distorted. So, I mean, obviously it's accurate, but it's distorted.
Yeah. Jean, quick follow up. Last week's podcast, you referenced about 55,000 rentals coming onto the market. How do you anticipate that those rentals, assuming they all get built and they're all funded, how do you think that will shake up the overall single family home market in the Miami or South Florida area?
Well, I mean, because you've wiped out a whole segment of the home buying uh, population, basically, and these are going to be people who are going to be renting. But the 55,000 units under construction in South Florida is a tsunami of rental units, and I just don't see the absorption happening as perhaps people might have expected during the pandemic when everybody was moving down here.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see.
Big. And this is a great segue for story number 3. Forrest, we're going to go to you with story number 3. And let me just lay out from the onset. You grew up in Miami. You've written a lot about business, trade, international. You've lived abroad. So I gave you this story because I want to see if you can give us some perspective as somebody who's maybe contemplating buying or renting at this point. So this piece is coming out of the Miami Herald. I'll read you the headline, first couple graphs. And then Forrest, if you could just provide your comments, what you sort of see going on and what you're sort of thinking. Here we go. Headline: should South Floridians buy a home now in hot housing market or wait until interest rates fall? And here's first couple graphs. Many aspiring home buyers are scratching their heads as they ponder the South Florida housing market. Record-breaking median prices 4 consecutive months despite plunging sales, and interest rates on mortgages that climbed to a 20-year high. Is now really the time to buy, or would it be better to wait and continue renting? Perhaps as long as until mid-year 2024, when interest rates likely will be lower. What other risks and rewards of buying now or sitting on the sidelines until later? Miami Herald spoke with 4 real estate professors and analysts to hear their recommendations for navigating the treacherous housing market. The advice comes on the heels of all-time high sales prices for both houses and condos in the Miami-Dade County area. Forrest, what do you make of it? Is this the time to buy? Are you looking to buy, or is this time to sort of sit back and take advantage of maybe those 55,000 rentals that John Gruss had referred to? So what say you, Mr. Jones?
Well, I would love to buy. I'm in the market, but I'm going to wait. Definitely going to wait. First of all, we got to see what interest rates are doing, and when they stabilize, with the home prices come. A Dallas Fed study says that home prices could plunge 20% before normalizing. Now you get that other argument when rates normalize and prices drop, people will come and snap back in. Therein are the assumptions behind the market. Is anyone's guess. We've had extremely loose monetary policy for decades, just quantitative, the Fed bond buying, goosing the economy, it's just flooded it, has made it possible. But will people continue to buy to perpetuity? One of my favorite sayings about South Florida is, it's different this time. Things are going to go up to perpetuity. No, people go back to work. Do people who move here, do they like it? Will there be interest rate differentials between Latin America and overseas and the Fed, which would crimp overseas demand? I don't know. It's anyone's guess. So I want to wait because I do know that the real estate market, if it does fall, unlike compared to equity, it'll bump along the bottom longer. And that Robert Shiller, who's the Yale economist behind the Case-Shiller Index, has said that. So you do get a little wait and see time compared to equities. And all that, you could rent a nice place and put your savings in an equity fund. There's so many different options out there. Why you wait and see. So for me, it's just too many unknowns. That said, South Florida's home. No matter where I've been, I'm like a boxer. I hail from here, even though I'm fighting somewhere else.
I like that.
Yeah, no, it's a great place. I want to stay here, but I don't know if I'm out of it. We have jobs where there's unemployment. There's so many different. So the assumptions going behind a decision need to be adjusted. Not only that, younger generations are coming up who are used to not owning. They don't want to own cars. They'd rather spend $100 on a haircut, for the experience. Will that demographic change affect pricing? There's just too many unknowns. So I'm just going to wait and see and just follow the macro and the local supply also. So.
And Forrest, just a quick follow-up. You're raised in Miami, you've lived abroad. What's your sense? What are people telling you on the ground? Is this similar to maybe what we saw in 2006 when things were really taking off? Is this similar maybe to the 1980s when there was a real run up in prices that ultimately collapsed and led to the first real significant condo downturn in Miami? So how does this and the pricing compare to previous types of cycles based on the people you're talking to, who've been around Miami for quite some time? They didn't just get here from New York and California during the pandemic.
Yeah. No, it doesn't seem as reckless as 2007, 8. It's prices are definitely high and all that, but it seems to be, not as scary. But then again, I remember I was talking to a realtor in 2007 and they were like, well, prices have cooled. Now's the time to jump back in. And we all saw what happened in 2008. No, I mean, I get the feeling that, we're not on the same ledge of recklessness. You don't have people, buying 2 or 3 condos around here in Brickell for no money down. So, it's going like a less dirty shirt.
Oh, it's only one day dirty. It's not 2 or 3 days dirty.
No,
Got
2
it.
days dirty. 2008 was 2 or 3 days dirty after a pickup football game. This is just, like one day dirty, maybe out a night at the club because everyone's sick and tired of being stuck through the pandemic. So,
Got it. Well, thank you, Forrest. We're going to go on to Mr. Fakler for story number 4. Mr. Fakler, a lot of people are buying real estate. A lot of investment companies are buying real estate because they want to be able to rent it out. And this is going to be story number 4. So you buy the place, you rent it out. Before you used to rent it out to individuals who'd rent it for maybe a month or 2 or 6 months or a year. Now a lot of people are buying them to rent them out via home sharing like Airbnb. So that's sort of the overview. This is a piece coming out of CNBC. It was actually a television piece. There wasn't an article associated with it. But I'm going to read you some of the key points because I went through and I watched the segment. It was on Last Call with Brian Sullivan on CNBC. And let me point out some of the point out the headline. I'll point out some of the key points, and then I want you to comment on that. And here is the CNBC headline. There's increased pressure on Airbnb owners to sell as supply outpaces demand, according to CEO Jerley out of Reventure. Okay, so that's the headline. Let me read you some of the graphs or some of the key points that comes out of it. So there's this gentleman who is a private equity group. He's an advisor. He says that basically there's about 1.5 million Airbnb units that are on the market in the United States. He says there's about 100 million single-family homes. He says that what's going on right now is that roughly as rates have gone up and these individuals have bought these homes to rent them out as Airbnb, they basically have gotten to the point where there's an oversupply. A lot of people were traveling domestically in the United States during the pandemic. Now they're going abroad if they're traveling at all because companies are bringing them back in the office. So this gentleman says as interest rates go up, as the costs go up, and we've talked before about insurance prices here in the state of Florida. We just recently had a hurricane last week, which hit, fortunately, a lesser populated part of the state of Florida. We have real estate taxes that go up because the value of your real estate as it appreciates and you feel wealthier, it also means you pay more in taxes. So there's a little bit of a switch going on, according to this gentleman, saying basically we got way too many Airbnbs, and some of the people who bought them as investments with no intention of living in them, whether they're individuals or the real estate investment trusts, are now finding themselves with an oversupply of units in the marketplace. So what say you, Mr. Fakler? Do we have too many Airbnb or a home sharing type of product out there? And could this maybe be a good sign for anybody looking to buy? Because as these individuals not able to rent them out, the costs go up, they look to sell it. And we know how much supply is currently on the market. So what is your take, Mr. Fakler? And by the way, you were an Airbnb host for some time. So if you can also get into some of that, we would love to hear about it.
Well, I was one of the original hosts, and it was a bit of a nightmare. We'll go into it a little later. But yeah, I think it's really a supply and demand issue. Basically, apparently from the story, the demand is still there, but there's so much supply. You have all these investors who got into this for either long-term rentals or for Airbnb purposes. And essentially they have lost a bunch of revenue. The story cites the 40% loss in revenue just from last year. That's huge. So this is sort of panicking these long-term investors, these owners of the real estate, to sell. And that sort of goes into your hypothesis that maybe it'll increase the supply if that happens. Maybe the prices will finally start going down. Another of the analysts on the program mentioned that he felt that the home prices were $100,000 overpriced as they stand. He was running the numbers, the interest rates, insurance, everything else. So, it sort of all ties together. And wouldn't that be something for us to start seeing supply, which we haven't seen?
Interesting. Yeah, and let me just add to that, Mr. Fakler. So one of the analysts in this segment, we're going to have a link to this interview that occurred on CNBC with Brian Sullivan on last call. The analyst said that the median house price is somewhere in the ballpark of 420, 430, 440, depending on when you look at it. But based on the numbers they were running, people could really only support about $283,000 home based on a median income of about $77,000 annually and a 7.5% interest rate, and also a 20% down payment to kind of get into it. So he's saying it's over $100,000 overvaluation going on. But Mr. Fakler, I'd be very curious. How did your Airbnb experience go? Were you able to make a lot of money? And how did the guests? What kind of reviews did they leave for you?
Well, I was living downtown Edgewater area at the time, and when I partaked in the Airbnb, they had a lot of concerts. You had a lot of big extravaganzas going on, so people paid money, a good price to come in.
Mr. Fakler, if I could interrupt, did you own your place or?
No, I rented my place, so technically it was a sublease.
Okay.
And eventually the owners found out about it, shut me down, among other things. But if you don't know what you're doing, like I didn't know what I was doing, you rent to, people who you don't know. And, I had one guy come in, he was here for one of the big concerts. I know we called him Morrissey because he looked like Morrissey. He flipped out, basically. He went to the beach and got in trouble. He lost my key. His mother called me. It was an insane asylum. And of course, they also give you the opportunity, the renters, the opportunity to rate you. And my ratings were not too good. One of the problems was I was, I had a small 1-bedroom and I was trying to find a place to sleep. So I was always in the way. And, it was a nightmare. See, you learn eventually, how to play the game. I was not too good at it. Never do it again.
Either John or Forrest, you guys want to comment? I mean, Mr. Fakler did not own his place. He was renting, and then he was renting out his bedroom and or his couch. So why would you go and buy real estate if you could just simply pull a hustle like Mr. Fakler was attempting to do, not very successfully?
Well, there was no competition.
Resourceful.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Story number 5. We are going to go to John. John, we're going to you with this story. Story number 5 is coming out of the Business Observer newspaper. I read the headline for a couple graphs, and I want you to comment. Again, a hurricane has just hit the state of Florida last week. We discussed it during the recording of our previous podcast that we were going to sort of get into it a little bit this week. But basically, hurricanes just hit. Last year, there was a serious hurricane. Prior to that, we had the collapse of this condo tower in Surfside, which is on the Barrier Island in Miami-Dade County. So we've had a lot of issues recently related to insurance. So that's the backdrop, Mr. Gruss. Before I read the headline in the first couple graphs, and I want you to comment. Headline: as property premiums rise, should state-run Citizens be charging more? Subhead: there's a school of thought that says Citizen Property Insurance Corporation, which is the insurer of last resort, it's a state entity. There's a school of thought that says Citizens Property Insurance Corporation should, like its counterparts in Louisiana and the private market, raise its premiums. First couple graphs. In late August, Florida's Office of Insurance Regulation responded to requests from Citizens Property Insurance to raise its rates for property insurance an average of 13.1% by using an order sending the state's insurance company of last resort back to the drawing board. It must, OIR said in the order, not raise the rates more than 12% in a state where the property insurance market is unraveling in real time, with skyrocketing costs leaving property owners scrambling, bewildered, in some cases uninsured. The capping of how much Citizens could charge was welcome news. Finally, the thinking went, someone put their foot down. But there's a theory. one that is bound to be controversial, that the smart fiscal move would not be to cap Citizens, but for the insurer to raise its rates far beyond the 13.1% asked for. Mr. Gruss, give us a reading of what's going on with insurance and whether or not Citizens needs to raise its rates. Because again, if Citizens were to go bad, the citizens of the state of Florida, i.e. the name, would have to bail it out. So what say you, Mr. Gruss?
Yeah, well, you'll remember Citizens was born after Hurricane Andrew in 1992. So it's been 30 years of insurance stories. And I've covered my share of insurance stories over the years. It's sort of the never-ending story. I mean, Citizens was designed to be the insurer of last resort, which means that it should be charging the highest prices on the markets. It should not be. It should not be the insurer that insures everybody. So
Right.
So the thing is, the theory goes that if Citizens is the insurer of last resort and charges the highest rates, then that will encourage private insurance companies to come into the States and realize that there's a market here that they can do business. Because if you'll recall, after Hurricane Andrew, State Farm, which was the largest home insurer in the state of Florida, picked up and left. So the creation of Citizens was designed to attract private insurance back to the state. And that really never happened because Citizens became a political entity that basically was there to provide cheap insurance for Floridians, or cheaper insurance for Floridians, and keep the real estate machine going. Because as we all know, the business of Florida is real estate. And so Citizens has now become not only the insurer of last resort, but the main insurer in the states, because it can't raise rates to the levels that make it self-sustainable for starters, and also to attract private insurers to the state. I mean, I don't know very many private insurance companies that are clamoring to come write homeowners insurance in Florida. So, I mean, so here we have a problem now, and it's unpalatable politically to raise Citizens rates. Every time they try to raise rates beyond what they, beyond 12%, everybody's screaming and shouting. But that's what needs to happen. It's bitter medicine, and we got to take it. It was interesting to read that Louisiana does not have a cap on rates. And I think, obviously their system is a lot healthier than ours. And, they're just as vulnerable to hurricanes as we are. So yeah, I think that's going to have to happen. But the problem is that it's just unpalatable politically. And then I'm sure the real estate lobby is, hard at work trying to keep Citizens in business and keep rates cheap. But ultimately, we'll all pay the price because as these catastrophes continue to hit the state, we're all going to be on the hook for it.
Mr. Gruss, if insurance rates were to go up by Citizens, much like Louisiana, which the story references, if suddenly if it was a premium to be with Citizens, obviously I guess the expectation would private sector would come in and they would be able to undercut the insurer of last resort, which right now it's the opposite. Right now, right. the insurer of last resort is actually the cheapest, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But I'm wondering, if you saw rates with Citizens go up, what do you think? What impact would that have on the housing market in terms of supply? There's a real tight supply right now. A lot of the properties are owned by investors and or REITs, groups that aren't living there and declaring a homestead because it's their primary residence. Could you see that impacting the housing supply that would be on the market?
Yeah, I mean, possibly, because I mean, insurance rates, even though they may seem high to us now, they're actually artificially depressed. And a lot of people perhaps own properties that they might not otherwise be able to afford because if insurance premiums were set at a competitive or at a market rate, they would be unaffordable. And actually, I think we're starting to see some of that. Some of those, particularly HOA, condo In the condo market, we're starting to see some people that are grouching about HOA fees that are going up, and of course, wrapped up in those are the insurance premiums that are really rising. Of course, that's due to the Surfside catastrophe. But I mean, certainly, it's going to drive the real estate market, and could possibly boost inventory. I mean, it's hard to tell because, really what are the rates that need to be set to do that? And that's really set by the market. Reinsurance. I was reading recently about catastrophe bonds. These are bonds that are sold to investors to help mitigate the risk of these storms.
Yep.
So, I mean, there are a lot of different variables, and that obviously the real estate market wants to continue to see the real estate industry, I must say, wants to continue to see less expensive rates, of course. And if they're going to do it, if they can do it politically, that's the way they're going to do it.
That's right.
But it's not to our benefits in the long run.
Interesting, John. Interesting. Forrest, we're going to go to you with story number 6. This is coming out of WSVN. This is basically the Fox affiliate down here in Miami. It's Channel 7. Channel 7. Let me read the headline, the first couple graphs. Surfside Planning and Zoning Board approves proposal to develop luxury condominium. If the name Surfside pops in anybody's head, that's because that's where the location was, where the tower that collapsed. Nearly 100 people died. $1 billion payout was basically made to the families of the roughly 100 people who died. Surfside, for anybody who doesn't know, is located on a barrier island in Miami-Dade County. It's located to the north of Miami Beach and to the south of Bell Harbor, as well as Sunny Isles Beach, which may be cities that people recognize depending on where you're listening to this podcast. So again, the headline, Surfside Planning and Zoning Board approves proposal to develop luxury condominium. Officials are moving forward with a plan to construct a new condo building at the site of the Surfside collapse. Surfside Planning and Zoning Board approved the proposal by a Dubai-based developer to build luxury condominium at 88th Street and Collins Avenue. But some of the families of the victims are not happy with the plan because they said the proposal calls for garbage pickup site and a loading dock next to the area designated to be a permanent memorial. 98 people died when the Champlain Tower South building collapsed back in June of 2021. Mr. Jones, Forrest, you write about international, you've lived abroad, but you're raised in the Miami area. I'm wondering if you could give us some sort of perspective, if you kind of give us both sides possibly, or your perspective of how you see this. We had this tower that collapsed. It was a disaster. The families were pushing for a memorial. This gentleman comes in out of the United Arab Emirates, buys the site, outbids everybody else. In fact, I'm not even sure if there were other bidders for the site, and now wants to put up a condominium. There's some concern here that the garbage pickup area, the bay, is going to be located in and around this memorial, which effectively the street where everybody died. How do you see this, Forrest?
Well, I mean, United Arab Emirates, Dubai, Miami, they come up as two real estate hubs. They're really not that alike. Yes, they're dependent on foreign direct investment, but Miami's, as you've seen, is more lax the oversight and the reason. Miami has more single family homes, where Dubai is a more of a condo story. They're both heavy in condo, but I think the key thing is Dubai is a semi-autonomous emirate, and is backed by some way or another a ton of oil. The Miami market is dependent on what goes on in Washington or Latin America, for its economics. So there's bigger cities in the region competed for, like Sao Paulo, Mexico City. Dubai has this ability to reinvent itself. It crashed in the first real estate boom. Then it came with tech. There's tech research, there's medical research. There's even a place called Dubiotech, kind of a cute name for their biotech research. Now they're a center of Islamic finance. In the Quran, the fee structure has to be different from a commission for interest. The cost of living in Dubai is probably 31 to 34% cheaper in Miami.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, if you go online and just pull out, you'll find a different set of facts. They all point to the same figure. It's much cheaper. That'll reflect higher salaries and all that. So they're going to come in with all this money, all this power, to place from what I've read, has lax oversight. They're probably going to enjoy doing business here.
Forrest, let me ask you. I've been to Dubai, I don't know, 3-4 times.
Yeah.
Or so. Spent some time there. Always in transit somewhere else. I would take some time off. I get on the subway. I go stay in a nice non-Western hotel. It's always like 5-star for like really reasonable prices. But to me, it always seemed like in Dubai and places, and I've been to Abu Dhabi, I've been to Doha. It always seems like these places, they don't have the population for all the product types or the brands. So they effectively are paying companies to come and open up there. So everybody living there is going to be able to have all the creature comforts, but like the numbers wouldn't necessarily justify, the brands being there. So I guess what I'm wondering is there a little bit of branding, international branding that might be going on here where you have a developer out of Dubai who's paying top dollar for this site and going ahead and trying to build a condominium in and around, let's call it the greater Miami Beach area? Or do you think the numbers can actually work? So is this branding? Is this like running a Coca-Cola commercial during the Super Bowl when everybody already knows or the World Cup? Everybody already knows who Coca-Cola is. Why do it? Or is this something where you think that, this might be longer term vision, looking at it from a perspective as an investor coming from, the Middle East?
Well, I mean, yeah, sure, there's always the branding benefit of that, but these guys can go much bigger than branding. I think they own soccer teams in the UK, Saudi Arabia, where
professional golf leagues in the United States.
I think one tower is not going to compare on that branding effort to owning Chelsea or whoever. Golf, whatever. But that said, I'm sure there's a branding component to it. But in that piece of real estate, I'm sure it makes economic sense for what they're doing there as well. So, yeah.
Interesting. John or Mr. Fakler, either of you have an opinion about this move by an international developer coming from Dubai, which is a condo development hub, and coming here and actually playing in the Miami and South Florida area?
I think it's just an opportunistic move. I mean, nothing more than that. There are nonstop flights from South Florida to Dubai now. So, that does bring in some people, I think.
That's a good point. I agree with Jean. Very opportunistic.
Interesting. Okay. Well, with that, guys, that's the last of our 6 stories. I want to thank each of you for participating in the podcast. I want to thank John Gruss, who's a journalist for over 25 years. He right now has a public relations and marketing company called Gruss Communications. You can go to his website, GrussPR.com. That's GRUSSPR.com. You can also get him on X, which is formerly Twitter, at John Gruss, JeanGruss. Also want to thank Mr. Fakler, John Fakler. John was a journalist for over 20 years, writing about white-collar crime as well as business stories when he wasn't doing restaurant reviews. If you want to get a hold of John, if you want to get a hold of Mr. Fakler on X, which is formerly Twitter, you can get him at JT Fakler, Fakler. Also want to thank Forrest Jones. He made his debut on the Miami Reporters Roundtable podcast today. Did an excellent job, providing some great insight. Right now, he's doing some freelance work. Anybody looking for a freelancer, reach out to Forrest Jones. You can get him on X, which is formerly Twitter, at AFJ3. AFJ3. Thank you, Mr. Jones, for participating. And let me remind the audience, if you have any comments for us, you want to criticize, you want to compliment, you can reach us on X at Miami RRP, at Miami RRP. Remember, not ARP, but Miami RRP, which stands for Miami Reporters Roundtable Podcast. And don't forget to check out our website for the merch. Go to CondoVultures.creator-spring.com, CondoVultures.creator, CREATOR hyphen, that line in the middle, and that spring. Just like I can't wait for spring.com. So until next time, hope everybody takes care of yourselves, and we'll catch up soon. Ciao, ciao.
It's a simple formula, and it works. Buy low, sell high. We're Condo Vultures, and when it comes to your real estate, we help you buy low. At Condo Vultures, we represent the buyer, and now's the time to buy. Log on to CondoVulturesTV for more information. CondoVulturesTV. And remember, before you sell high, you have to buy low. Featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, 60 Minutes, and Time Magazine. Condo Vultures Realty, a licensed Florida real estate brokerage capitalizing on the condo correction since 2006.
This is Peter Zalewski of the Condo Vultures podcast. Before I started doing these podcasts, I've been in the business of being a licensed real estate broker, a contributing columnist for the Miami Herald, as well as the Miami Real Deal, but also extra witness work in consulting. So if you are looking for an expert witness, or if you're looking for consulting services, a straight talk perspective as to what's going on in a particular marketplace, a building, or what happened previously, for whatever your situation is, whether you are an attorney, whether you are a institutional fund looking to invest, or whether you're a lender who's trying to come up with some sort of strategy and approach for your lending committee going forward, I just might be able to help you. To get a hold of me, please reach out to Peter@CondoVultures.com. That's Peter@CondoVultures.com, or give me a call to the office at 305-865-5859, 305-865-5859.